Hi, in this next video I'm going to talk about lifelines. I'm sure you've heard the phrase add a lifeline before. It is essentially so that you can save your work. Let's say you're doing a pattern, you add a lifeline, you don't have any mistakes up to here, you're all good, so you want to add a lifeline so that you can continue knitting, and you can do by blocks of 10 rows, 15, 20, however many you want. Let's say you do 10 rows. You didn't make any mistakes, great. You can add another lifeline or pull this one out and put a new one in, or the same one. You do another 10 rows and it's good, and then you do another 10 rows and you've made a mistake. Well, then you can just rip out those 10 rows that you've done down to that lifeline, the last lifeline that you added. And it makes knitting a little less scary, because if you make a mistake, it's a way of fixing your mistakes without having to always depend on others. The one thing that's very important about a lifeline when you're adding it is not to split your stitches, because if you do, you won't be able to pick them up properly, and it defeats the purpose of having a lifeline. So that's one very important thing. There's two traditional lifelines, and then there's an afterthought lifeline. So I'll spend 2 seconds explaining the afterthought lifeline first. It's in case you've made a mistake and it's far down and you didn't add a lifeline, but you're a little apprehensive about making sure you pick up all your stitches, you can add a lifeline where you didn't add one. So for example, where you have all the stitches, you want to find a row, like a knit row or something, where all the stitches are the same, and it'll just be easier. And a stitch is usually a V, so you have your left leg and you have your right leg. So you're just going to go ahead and from the beginning pick up all your, let's say, right legs or left legs, whatever you want, you choose. I'm picking up on my right legs, and I'm just going all along the same row. I have to be careful when I'm doing this not to jump to the row below, because then when I go and pick up my stitches, I'm going to have a hard time. So I want to make sure I stay all in the same row, and I just weave my lifeline in through all my stitches. And so then this is your afterthought lifeline. And now you could take your needles off your work and rip all your work down to here, and all your stitches would be saved onto this lifeline. It's not the best way of doing it, but if you're really worried about losing stitches, this is a good technique to apply. But you do run the chance of splitting your stitches, or maybe forgetting to pick one up, so it's not foolproof. So the ideal thing is to add it while you are working, and one of the ways of adding it is using a doll needle, and you're going to want to go through each live stitch, making sure again you don't split it. I'm going to show you what happens if we do split it. So if I'm here and let's say I'm splitting this one, oops, I'm going to split that one. When I come around, if I have to fix this row, I won't be able to pick up that stitch properly because I haven't caught it properly. So I'm going to come across a problem here. So the lifeline won't have served its purpose because it's not holding all my live stitches. So it's really important to take the time and do it properly. If you do split your stitch, don't worry, you don't have to take the whole thing out. Just take that one out and continue on picking up all your stitches. And you do this all the way across. Let's say now I have like 300 stitches, and doing this one by one seems a little daunting. And I'm using my circular needles. I have to be using interchangeable needles to do the next technique of adding a lifeline, because all the newer interchangeable needles, I don't know if you can see, they have this little hole. That hole is, the purpose of that hole is to tighten your needle onto the cable. But you can also use it to add a lifeline. And the way I do it is by using dental floss. So I get some dental floss, and I know it's a little finicky and a bit time consuming, but it is really worth the couple of minutes it takes to do this. So I fold my dental floss in half, and I'm going to put it in through that little hole that's there. And there it is. Once I've got it there, I just need a loop on this side. I don't want to pull it all the way through. I just want to keep that loop. And I'm going to add my different colored yarn, my Lifeline yarn, into that little loop I put through my needle. And then I'm going to pull my floss back through, bringing with it my Lifeline. So now I have my Lifeline. Now I forgot to mention, it's really important to add the Lifeline on the needle that you're going to be working, right? If I'm going to be working these stitches, it has to be this needle that has a Lifeline. If I put it on the needle that's over here, my stitches aren't going to get onto the Lifeline. So make sure you put them there, and then you just go ahead and knit. And as you're knitting, you're pushing your stitches through, and as you're knitting, the Lifeline will be incorporated into your stitches. Actually, I just thought about it. It doesn't matter which needle you put the Lifeline in, because as you're knitting them onto this needle, it'll go through the Lifeline there too. So it makes no difference. Whatever works for you. Now, if you're doing it this way or the other way, make sure you don't knit your Lifeline. You just want to knit your stitches without knitting into the Lifeline, because the Lifeline is not meant to be a permanent fixture. It's something that you're going to want to remove. So as you're knitting, make sure you don't knit your Lifeline. Let me just finish this row, and okay, so when you finish your row, make sure that you have the Lifeline that's sticking out on both ends. It's coming out of this end, perfect. And I'm going to release it from my needle. And so now I have my Lifeline through all my stitches, and I've knit another row. Let's say I've knit up and I've realized I made a mistake. So now I want to go back down to where my Lifeline is. This is the scary part, but you can do this. It's okay, because your stitches all went onto the Lifeline, and they were live stitches, and there were no mistakes there. So you go ahead and pull out your work. Pull your work out, and you're going to unknit or pull your working yarn down to where the Lifeline is. So I just keep pulling until I get to my Lifeline. And once I reach my Lifeline, which obviously it was just one row, all my stitches are on this Lifeline, just the way they need to be put back onto my needle. So it's very easy for me to come around now and carefully pick up all my stitches. I just follow my Lifeline. I just want to follow my Lifeline. Don't twist your stitches. Don't try and do anything funny or funky, whatever. Just follow your Lifeline and pick up your stitches. Again, try not to split them. So you see if how this would be difficult to do if you had split your stitches. You wouldn't be able to just pick them up. And And there you go. That's what the purpose of a lifeline is. I've got all my stitches saved, and then I can keep going back up again, and if I make a mistake I can bring it back down, but it's just a safety net. I hope that was helpful.